And we're live with our 100th episode, our 100th, very special 100th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi. Oh, shoot.
Whoops. Hey, everybody. And we're back to Earth. Right?
Yeah, I'm not sure why that just started looping like that, but whatever. It works.
It's fine. Welcome to the 100th episode, like Ken was saying. We're excited to be here. We're excited to still be talking, I guess. At first, I wasn't sure if it was the 100th real episode or just the 100th episode in quarantine, right? You know, because like the days are the same here over and over again. But we do have a few things to talk about this week. There's been a lot going on with even just yesterday, the whole supposed denial of service attacks or whatever was going on to bots, to Ken's got some stuff that's popping up. We got to talk a little bit about Midsummer Night's Con because I know that's there may be some changes going on there as well. So we'll just jump straight into it. I know I think, Ken, let's kick off with the Rails session issue or the cookie issue that you were talking about, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. Well, before we do that,
okay.
Like I think that there's a couple things to note. I think it's like we'll get the link and post it in the show notes. It just popped in my head, but I know in July, I think it's like July 12th or a Sunday in July. I don't remember the exact date that we're you and I are going on. Is it the Women in AppSec podcast or it's another one? Hold on. I have to look at the calendar. Sorry. So we don't know the date and we don't know where we're going to be, but we know that we've got something going on in July. So
no,
let's see.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's see. I think it's July 12th. We're on OWASP DevSlop, right?
Yes. No, I'm sorry. I think it was because it was during I got that kind of messed up because we had conversations going at the same time with two different groups. So anyways, so it's the OWASP DevSlop team that we're going to go on. They're also using StreamYard. Cool. So that should be fun.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think, in that one, that we'll be just doing code review, walkthrough. It's an hour, so we'll compress everything down. We've done it before. But most likely what we'll be doing is pulling up a code base and actually analyzing it, using our process for doing secure code reviews as much as we can, right? Like as much as we want to get through. So.
Yeah. And then on top of that, we're still doing Black Hat virtual, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, still giving the course virtually at Black Hat. I asked Seth because he's got the account to tell me if we've been canceled or not. So, yes, we're still on. And then I think two things. One was we are probably going to submit, the due date's the 30th this month, but we're going to submit for LastCon to do training out there, secure code review training. And that's in, I think, October. So I think we should be safe for travel by then, hopefully. You know what? Who knows? We'll see what happens, but worth submitting for because we haven't been to LastCon in a few years, and you've never been to LastCon. What am I saying?
Yeah, I've never been to LastCon. Yeah, and we did get picked up for OWASP Global San Francisco, right?
That too, yeah.
So we'll see where that one goes. Like everything's just kind of up in the air right now because we don't know what travel is going to look like. We don't know what conferences are going to look like. And I don't know about you, Ken, but like there's been so much virtual stuff coming at me every day that it's almost like, I don't know. I feel like things are starting to get lost in the noise, right? I don't have a good way to summarize what's actually out there, and it would take, right? So we were talking a little bit about TLDR-sec before, right? And how Clint does a great job of summarizing all these different articles and conferences and talks and, research that's going on. But it's almost like at this point, the way that we've shifted to online with all these virtual conferences. Like, I mean, Circle City Con was this last weekend, but again, it was virtual, right? But, they're putting out all these YouTube videos from it, and we've got so much content that is being streamed to the industry at large that I feel like I'm missing things all over the place, because number one, there's people not going and not like dedicating time. Like, it's really easy to stream something and then not pay very good attention to it, right? You and I both know this from having taught courses, virtual courses in the past. Yeah, people have a tendency to multitask. Whereas if you're going to Circle City Con and you're sitting in the conference, you're much more likely to pay attention to what the speaker is saying. And that's not to say that people don't do that, but I feel like there's like, it's almost like somebody needs to start summarizing everything that's going on, but that's a very difficult thing to do, right?
If only there was a podcast that could put out a page. No, it's definitely can't be you or I. We're a little swamped at the moment. So, but yeah, like that would be pretty nice. You're right. That would be really nice. Except for, I will say, like of course, our virtual conference is amazing, but
yes,
all virtual conferences, I don't know. I don't know, like that I want to attend every virtual conference that's out there. That was actually the last talking point, by the way, just for news, was that we're, I guess I'll just say it, like we're figuring out so there's no surprise with the pandemic that people have had situations arise, and we're finding it difficult to roll with our original date, just because we really specifically wanted, let me rephrase that. We wanted a very specific set of people. And it's just the nature of living in 2020 right now that things might move around. So we're going to figure out if we should just, whenever these things come up, it's usually like best to just go with your original, like your vision, even if that means the dates have to change. So that might happen. We'll see. We'll keep everyone posted.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'd rather do something right than do it on time.
Yeah.
So
that's Midsummer Night's Con. Might not necessarily be on Midsummer Night, but that's what we're hoping for. Is that June 24th? But I think it may slip a little bit, just based over the last couple of days, some of the stuff that's happened with some of the speakers. And again, it's going to be a very compressed, highly technical, highly curated set of talks. And so, yeah, we want to do it right. Is really what it boils down to. And I know I'm ranting about virtual cons and like everything that goes into it, but I do feel like there is a lot of good content that is coming out, and that's where I was trying to go with that. Is I know that I'm missing stuff that I should be paying attention to, and that we should probably be talking about because of all the noise that's out there. Because there is so many virtual conferences, right? Like it used to be that, hey, Circle City Con was going on. And I know that like more about that one because we actually onboarded them to Hacker Tracker. And then I'm like, okay, how useful is it to have a virtual conference in Hacker Tracker? And so I'm having to rethink what we're doing for DEF CON as well, and how we can make the app actually useful. Because, when you don't have to stand in a line, you're not at a conference location, physical location, is it really something that's, super needed? Or is there a way that I can curate all the video streams or something like that to make it a better experience? Anyway.
No,
so,
that when you get some, like I definitely, you should go through a recap of like when you've got something implemented, once it's been used by a conference or two, and you've got some like information to present to people. I think that would be really fun to hear about how you worked around the current limitations with that app. So it should be super fun.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing has been curating the video, right? Like how can I pull in these different streams into the application for the conference itself, so they don't have to go and, build out whatever, because most of them are streaming through YouTube or through Vimeo or whatever else, like even Discord. But all those streams, it should be easy to pull those together in one location. So we can get into it. Like once I get that settled, that's got to take some dev time on my side, and yeah, it's always a matter of time. But yeah, I don't know. So I like part of me is interested to see what people, like, if you're listening to the podcast, jump into the Slack channel. What conferences, what virtual, like, actual events have you been paying attention to? Like, everyone went virtual and we all did, hey, every conference every couple of days, and it felt like there was so much data coming out and so much research being presented that now I'm just overwhelmed. So I'm wondering how people actually curate that and decide what it is they're paying attention to, as opposed to, just like your local meetups, right? I have multiple meetups. I think about it, over the years, having gone to all these different places and spoken at all these little developer meetups and everything like that. And they're all virtual now. So it's basically on any given night, I can attend a meetup anywhere from, New York City to San Francisco, right? And they've all got really, like, good content that's coming out. So again, it's just like, how do you decide what it is that you're interested in, and how do you jump into that? So, I mean, Ken, have you been doing any of these virtual events, or did you just let it drop? I mean, I'm busy too, so work takes priority.
Yeah, I did watch a bit of content. I can't remember. It was in the more towards the beginning of this whole thing. And I've participated in a few Zoom virtual happy hours as well, which has been pretty nice. Yeah. I know that, actually, speaking of, we've got Michael McCabe and Ken Toller coming on the podcast next week to talk about cloud security at scale, the talk that we loved from DevSecOps days. Why I brought that up is they're doing like an OWASP meetup for our local chapter. They're doing a talk on cloud security at scale. So I'll be watching that. But yeah, besides involvement in local things, not so much on the conference front for me, more just like virtual happy hours and little local events, nothing major, just trying to stay sane and connected.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. Like, trying to stay connected with the people that you know and that you would see on a normal basis is one thing. But the other thing that's popped up recently is like Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference is all virtual this year, right?
I think that's the plan for GitHub's. We did satellite, and I think that's maybe maybe Universe will be that way too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No. It may be, but satellite was interesting that way, right? Like, as somebody that is, somewhat tangential to GitHub and even to Apple WWDC, right? Like, I do develop apps, but like on the security side, that's not as interesting to me. Exposing that information means, again, there's another stream coming at me that I'm interested in, but I don't necessarily have a good way to curate what's coming out of it and what is relevant to me as a security guy, as opposed to just a general developer or whatever else. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with all this, but it just, like, I'm feeling very overwhelmed with the amount of virtual content that's available, and not sure on, where to spend my time is basically what it boils down to. Feels like my spare time has gotten even less because of it. So.
Crazy. Wow. Yeah, I'm pretty busy myself. I don't know. I don't know why. Yeah. That's been a byproduct, but there was something else I was going to mention that something you said. If I remember, I'll come back to it, because something you had mentioned was like actually pretty interesting. Crap. I have something related to it as well. Anyways, I don't know. It'll pop in my head at some point, but yeah, like, I definitely, there's been a lot of virtual conferences. We'll see if they're like which ones are the most useful, but right now it's just, I don't know. It's hard. It's been a struggle. I think we talked about this a few times. Oh, actually, there is one thing too to mention, that we are, so in terms of guests, we've got, so like I mentioned, Ken Toller and Mike coming on next week. Then we will have a special guest on once we've got it all locked down. We'll announce, but this special guest is an expert in, because the security community has talked so much in the last week or two about obviously with Black Lives Matter going on, that there and not just that, but like things like changing terms and technology, which I know we want to talk about. But I think we have somebody who's actually an expert in biases and in gender studies, race relations, things like that. And they're, again, I don't want to like put any more information out until it's completely locked in, but they did say yes. So we're in the process of getting that date scheduled. The other thing is we've got, I'm talking to a couple different security technology providers, because they had reached out and asked for sponsorship to sponsor the podcast. And as most people know, we really have said no to all sponsors. So right now, the deal is like, I'd rather take your time than your money. So I think that's, and Seth, we would rather have your time than your money. So we've got two other pretty interesting technology companies that we want to hear about their technology products. So that's kind of like what's going on with the podcast, but we have so much to get through today. So maybe we should just jump. What do you think? Should we jump right in?
Yeah. Let's jump into the Rails stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. So my boss.
But really,
sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No. But really, what?
Yeah. Really, if anybody like has any good locations that they're curating, virtual conferences, please let us know, and we'll retweet it out. So, all right, jump into the Rails stuff. Let's go.
Sweet. I think it was I believe. So I'm going to mention two names from GitHub. Greg Osa, my boss, who was on the podcast. I always like to call him my boss because it makes him uncomfortable when I say that. So I don't know why. He's always like, it sounds weird when I'm like, my boss. But yes, my manager, Greg Osa, was digging in because there are some companies that are interested in this, I'm sure, that have a similar setup where we have a specific need to prevent cookie tossing. So cookie tossing is like when you're able to overwrite.
That sounds so bad, but yeah, go ahead.
Cookie tossing. Oh my God, it does. Jesus, I didn't think about that. Oh,
I mean, it's a specific attack. So describe what the attack is.
Well, it's pretty much.
I'm super professional today, apparently. So yeah.
Well, let's say you had XSS on a subdomain and you wanted to use that XSS to overwrite a cookie on like GitHub.com or Microsoft.com or defcon.com. I don't know. I'm just picking things I'm literally looking at on my screen that remind me of different companies. Marvel.com. How about that with the masks?
Okay.
Let's say whatever you want to overwrite some cookies on that domain from a subdomain. There are protections there's one specific protection. It's a cookie prefix that you can place on your cookie naming convention. Let me actually type this out because I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but let's say I did this, some cookie equals ABCD. 1, 2, 3. So I don't get hit by they let it go through. Sometimes the YouTube police don't let these things go through. So cool. So that's the kind of the naming convention. And what in modern browsers, which is the browsers that we're concerned about, the __ host hyphen is actually a prefix read by the browsers that says, look, don't let this cookie is not to be set or get by any other subdomain or domain. This is just this domain that we're on now, or subdomain, or whatever we're on now. That's what can set and get a cookie, nothing else. So that's our protection there. That's everybody. When I say we, that's everybody's protection there. Modern one. The other one is you can also, this is for like to guarantee that cookies are only sent over HTTPS. You can also use this prefix. I'm just going to, not the whole cookie, just put in the prefix. That's __ secure hyphen for those that are on audio only and can't see. Okay, so going back to the __ host hyphen, and really this affects both. There are more frameworks mentioned there are more frameworks vulnerable to this than just this one. But since it's already publicly released for Rails, I'm just gonna like put this out. Again, this is not to say that Rails is less secure. It's to say that there are multiple frameworks that actually have this issue. Rails is just the one that's first responding and being public about it. So, Gaddy. No, anyways, because everybody always craps on Rails. So yes, I'm gonna want to shove that in people's face. Rails was first. No, but so Matt Langlois on our product security team at GitHub and Greg Osa on the AppSec team came together. Got you'll see them named in that article. They got they got a little mention there. That was nice. And the vulnerability is such that essentially the rack will allow a percent encoded cookie to overwrite existing prefixed cookie names, right? So that's kind of the
Ken, did you post up that link?
Did I not?
I'm not seeing it anywhere.
Did the YouTube police get me? Oh, I did. I see it on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Okay.
I didn't put it in the Slack. Sorry, I should put it in the Slack.
That's fine. I can do that. Just keep going. Keep going. You're good.
Okay, cool. Where was I at? So okay, so we know that. Sorry, so it's possible to forge a secure host-only cookie prefix in rack. So the problem with the idea is that if you have a percent encoded cookie on the server, it's like seen as valid, but on a browser, you wouldn't see that as valid, for instance, as like a host prefix. That's my understanding anyways. So the issue is that you could overwrite effectively a legitimate cookie. So let's say, I don't know, like a subdomain.example.com has this vulnerability. And hopefully I'm not poorly describing this, but let's say it has that vulnerability and you've got some issue that allows that cookie to be forged. So imagine that subdomain is able to set now a cookie that will be sent to github.com that is for, it's interpreted by the applications as valid, as a valid cookie value. It will completely bypass that host prefix, because the whole idea is that you couldn't get or set on subdomain.example.com and have that cookie sent to example.com and example.com look at that cookie as valid. But effectively, if you were to send off that percent encoded cookie off to, say, example.com, it was using a vulnerable framework, one of the many vulnerable frameworks, it would see that as a wait, sorry. Let me reread this. Yes. So basically, if subdomain.example.com was able to write, if you had some vulnerability where you're able to get that application to write arbitrary cookies, such as like, I don't know, response header injection or something like that, then you would be able to forge valid cookies that would be able to overwrite domains that you did not think that they could overwrite. They could get or set for domains you would not think that would be possible for. And this is important. I think it's going to become a bigger thing. That's why I'm kind of talking about, even though all the details are still pretty sketchy to a degree. I think that you'll see this come up. I think this is going to be a big deal for a lot of frameworks, because this is the sole mechanism in which a lot of us are preventing the cookie tossing vulnerability. I know, I hear the chuckles from you already there, Seth, but this is going to be the primary way that these values are, that this attack is mitigated. So I'm trying to look at the patch now, because I haven't looked at the patch, so I'm kind of curious what. Well,
it was interesting just to see the workaround that was there, right? And again, I know we talked about this last week. Most fixes that we see are incredibly simple, right? And even the workaround is just, hey, when you're parsing your cookies header, let's just unescape these values and not allow the percent encoding to happen. That's realistically all it does. So the patch itself shouldn't be all that complex.
No, it's not. Sorry, let me actually pull it up. Sorry, I'm actually just looking at that.
Let's look at it. We may as well look at code, right? We're an application security podcast.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, then
Sorry.
Link.
Check out the video. Yeah, I was
Here,
just looking
we'll
at
read
what
it to
they
you.
added.
Minus a/lib/rat. Just kidding. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, so that's like the main deal then, it looks like. It's actually in how Rack is processing the cookies that it receives. And so unescape value. I noticed unescape somewhere here. Okay, so before we parse the header by not regex, that's one change I noticed, is that we're splitting now by regex instead of like by string. Well, I assume anyways. I assume that's what that's doing, since they're passing in a string value. And then so they parse that and they unescape each of these. So that this right here means that. So when you see this like this brace block here, that's like saying that's the same as doing like dot each do, and then having s and then doing some like multi-line. I don't know what's s. I don't know, like do something with s, and s is like essentially if it's an array or a hash. It is iterating through key values. In this case, if it's an array, so usually if you do go through like a hash, if you're iterating through a hash and or in Python, it's known as a list. It's going to have two values, like key value. But if it's just an array, it's just going to be like a key value there. And this is going to be named where. I'm just doing this because I don't know how many people know about Ruby. So this is an enumerator right here. Yep. So then after that, this is the cookie object that's the result of all of this operations, which essentially should be a list that comes back, you would hope, of unescaped like whatever values here. Let's assume basically headers, right? So the processing should have, I guess if I'm reading this correctly, the URL encoding should, in theory, or decoding rather, should happen there. So the idea is that if a URL encoded cookie were to reach Rack, then it would be accepted as a legit cookie instead of what the browser sees it as a non-legitimate cookie, because it shouldn't be URL encoded and stored URL encoded like that. Yeah. So anyway, so that means the special characters I assume the special characters in that host part of that prefix is what gets URL encoded. That would be my assumption. So underscore would be whatever the result of whatever URL encoded, or URL encoded, whatever underscore is when it's URL encoded, or an underscore rather, then that would be what it's stored at. If you were looking at it in the browser, that's what it'd be stored as. Anyways, I don't know with each with object, each with is usually, I mean, it sounds like they're just taking the result of this, and each item in the array would be an object, although they are passing in this hash value, which is usually each with object. That looks a little bit like dot inject from Ruby. I'm a little rusty on each with object, but that looks a little bit like dot inject, which is a function where you give it some thing, like in this case, a hash, and it's going to allow you to quickly enumerate through values and then store it in a way that you want to. So in this case, we're going to iterate through each of the cookies. They have a key value, so it is a hash. And the hash key is going to equal an array if the array is equal to whatever v is. So v dot first. So this is what is this, a modulo operator they call it, when it's you ask a question, whatever the result is. If it's true, then it's this, and then if it's false, it's this.
It's that. Yep.
Right. So that's what they removed. Going into what they added though, and then it like also returns an empty hash if there's no header. So cool. So here instead, I think the change, what they add is they remove this stuff, and we see that they have a header they split with a regex, and then they perform the same each with object cookies. Next, if cookie.empty. So if the cookie value here, the key is empty, then go to the next operation here. We split the key. We have a key value that's a result of calling cookie.split. And cookie.split just takes a string and splits it by this, right? So on the front end, you'd have underscore host hyphen whatever the name is. And on the back end, you'd have the second half of that split would be the value. And then the cookies key equals the unescaped value. So it looks like they're rescuing if, unless there's Oh, okay. So unless the cookie already has the cookies.key has that key, then it's adding that value there.
So
to
like
me,
the interest,
properly unescaping.
yeah.
To me, it looks like they're just trying to properly unescape here, and there was some bypass.
Yeah. So like the issue, like what we're seeing, like the key value. So what you notice from the initial parse query on that is they're splitting, they're just splitting the cookies based on each of the cookies and then encoding the whole thing, right?
Right.
So having some of those percent signs in there, especially on the key side of that, like the cookie name side of that, is where you're getting those collisions, right?
Right.
And so that unescape is actually colliding, and so it's making it so you can overwrite those cookies for different hosts. Whereas the second case, you're not allowing that. You're only unescaping the value, not the actual key. So,
right.
I mean, it's a pretty simple fix, all things considered. I don't know, like, had I seen those two lines though previously, like if I'm doing a secure code review, I don't know if I would have pulled that out of this, right? It's a pretty good edge case that, like, unless I was really versed in cookie tossing, right, and I was concerned about it with this application, I probably would have just moved straight through that. I don't know about you, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about something here. Sorry, I'll test that later, and I don't want to hold up but yeah, like that makes sense. So they're just making sure that the cookie key like you said, the cookie key is just staying in its unencoded state so that it can't overwrite existing cookies. And frankly, like if you think about it, this is one of those issues where the browser standards and web security standards collide with the way that we've been doing processing of sessions. And this is a pretty good example of where those just get out of alignment, right? Because like the whole __ host thing and __ secure prefix, those were standards proposed, but not like widely used. And honestly, I don't know, like I'm sure there are plenty of companies where this is a necessary security thing for them, like us, but like protection. But yeah, I don't know like this just feels like a new thing, a newish thing, and maybe not everybody has a use case for it. So it's pretty easy to see why a framework would get out of sync on that like, I guess, attack / vulnerability.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's always fun to do, your first code review of a new thing that was just released last night live in front of people, and try and dissect what all's going on. Because you have to remember, even though we've been talking about it like casually been mentioned, internally, it's like not even been that. Oh, by the way, geez, I didn't even see this before. Hold on. Yeah, it's a little just not widely talked about. So I'm sort of kind of getting some of the details, and maybe we can have Greg back on to talk through some of this. But yeah, like, so the test is pretty interesting, right? It's exactly what.
Because that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see HTTP cookie, and it's got that encoded value there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because of how the parsing was happening before, it's allowing you to overwrite foo with whatever value you want, right? Yeah.
So that makes sense. So the actual issue is basically a rack app. If you were able to get it to forge
a cookie,
a cookie. Yeah. Interesting. That would be very, very, I'm telling you, what I do know for certain is this is not the only framework that's vulnerable. So
yeah,
keep an eye.
Well, that always like spins back into kind of the some of those other session vulnerabilities, right? Session fixation attacks, right? Or anything of that nature. If I can pull a value and then pass it along through a subdomain to github.com, and then you use that as your actual credential, like there's there's a potential here to actually lead to session hijacking because of how that's actually done, right?
Yeah, you just need the app to reflect back the session, and then you've got it setting a valid value. So, which is bypassing the whole idea of set get for these prefixes. That's the whole idea. So that's what they're doing. So that's interesting. Cool. Anyways, I thought that was a fun one. Like there's a few other things we obviously want to talk about today. Is there anything else on that one before we move on to eBay?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. And I mean, we could probably, by the way, just, I think we could pretty much, we'll talk about the DDoS, but I think we could pretty much summarize the DDoS from yesterday as it's been alleged it's not a DDoS, but let's pull up the eBay one real quick.
Okay.
Finding the article. Here, I found it. NBC News. Here we go. All right. So if you did not catch this, I didn't put it in Slack. If you did not catch this one, do you want to talk about this or should I give an overview?
Yeah, you may as well give the overview on it. I think you've got a better handle on it.
Well, just the long and short of it was that there were the FBI's charged 6 people within eBay. They're within the security and like privacy and this is the worst one. Like one's like a director of their public safety or something like that. It's like basically it's community safety director who is part of this. So 6 people charged by the FBI there was this couple. They wrote a newsletter that was bashing eBay. The 6 people within the security side of things inside of eBay decided to essentially attack these folks. They were ordering crazy things on their behalf, shipping them crazy things all times and days of the week. And it essentially just a huge harassment. But even further, they went and this is where it got really, really weird. Well, if that wasn't weird enough, they also they told them that they were gonna help these folks. So the security team reached out to these folks who they were harassing to say, look, we're trying to stop this on your behalf. We're trying to help you. I think they the news referred to it as like a white knight strategy or something like that. It's bananas. The whole thing is insane. And to have your director of privacy community safety doing that is just
this is. Yeah. I mean, this goes back to mob style tactics, right? It'd be a shame if your store burned down, right? You better pay us for protection. That's honestly what it feels like if you read through that article what amazes me is so many kind of high level senior managers at eBay were involved with this, right? It wasn't one little rogue group of whatever technologists or whatever, embedded in one team that were going after a newsletter that was somewhat detrimental to eBay. But even then, I'm amazed that eBay or anyone at eBay would even worry about something so innocuous, right? There's so much crap online about every single company that's out there. What is it that made them target this one small newsletter, right? I don't get it.
Yeah. Yes, I don't get it either. Hold on. Now I put the article on. Apparently I just sent it to you in Slack.
No.
Oh man, I'm not the smartest. But it's crazy. They used this is the quote I'm trying to copy and paste over here, but it's again, I'm having some issues. But yeah, so this is a crazy thing. So it says all the while they were hiding. So they were using burner phones. They were using overseas email accounts, prepaid debit cards with cash, which by the way is, man, if you ever, I guess this is a side note, if you ever deal with on the security side, I've dealt with this on the AppSec security side of things where we had to, it was like an online, I don't want to say the name of the company because I don't know I won't say the name of the company, but the sort of summarized version is it was an online commerce only through like mobile app website. And they actually had a huge issue with fraud with prepaid debit cards. And that is like a whole, I feel like we could bring on an expert to talk at length about fraud, about prepaid debit cards being used as part of fraud. I mean, coupon schemes, like there's some crazy stuff that goes on. And I think it's fascinating. I would love to find somebody who would be willing to talk about it that's an expert in it. But yeah, I mean, like it's just the depths they went to. And I don't get the reason. It was because they were like not happy with how this couple of people talked about eBay.
Yeah, I don't like, honestly, right? And this wasn't that long ago, company first notified 2019, right? Like, so it was last year, and I'm like, you're eBay. What is this? Like, what is it that they're trying to cover up here, or what is it that they think they're preventing?
Oh my God, they went to their house to install GPS. They were planning on putting a GPS tracking device on the car of the couple. The plan was foiled when the victim spotted the group of former eBay employees and contacted the police department. Man. And this is one of those things that kind of like, because I mean, I think it's no stranger that there's been a lot, which is another article that we were planning on talking about. But there's been a lot of like concern about tech companies sort of and their involvement in a lot of things from privacy to politics to whatever. And, which is like the whole point about having people that are focused on community and safety and things of those nature and like ethical, practicing and abiding by ethical standards. Like I think this is a time where that's more important than ever. And to hear the eBay, like, I guess one thing I wanted to really highlight is just though that from a leadership perspective, if one person is a bad apple, that's one thing. But if we are saying 6 people within a department or multiple departments, all maybe they're all under security, but like multiple, departments within security, that seems like there's a real toxicity issue there with leadership. That seems like it would be like a workplace thing. It would be like, this is our culture. If it's 6 people.
Yeah, I don't like, and even like, I don't know. You go to that website that it mentions in the article of like, this is where they were posting eBay articles. And it's not like anything, I don't know. I mean, maybe we have to get back to whenever these articles were posted that they're really worried about.
Right.
But I mean, it feels like it's just it's just some place that's generating content, right? It's a content generator that they're looking for, publishing ads on a blog, trying to make some money around things. It's semi-interesting, but nothing that the CEO or like the head of safety and security at eBay, I would think would be worried about, right? Yeah. Anyway, no. Yeah. It kills bananas.
I mean, I'll tell you right now, people have for sure, especially if you're a large size company, for sure people have seen on Twitter bash companies that I have worked for that are big or work for, whatever, because they're unhappy with things. I mean, like when the Microsoft acquisition of GitHub went down, I saw many of my own friends having surprising reactions to it. Anyways, and like that's I think for normal, well-adjusted people, who cares? That's how you feel, man. Like who cares? To have a group of people that feel like they need to go this route, it's just, to me, it speaks volumes about the importance of having good hiring practices, proper leadership in place, and all those things that we would expect a company to have. I just don't understand how something like this goes.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm looking at the site itself, and realistically, most of the news around eBay is like, oh, they made an update to the user agreement. Oh, they're doing a survey about like diversity. You know what I mean? It's not like, yeah, this got way out of control.
Yeah.
And should never have gotten to that point. And the people that were involved are the ones that probably should have shut that down. Yeah.
Was it the 51-year-old manager and then 3 team members? I don't know. I think so. Yeah. I'm not really sure. It seems really strange, like the whole thing. So there's definitely more questions than answers right now, but I think the behavior is pretty. It's definitely like, yeah. I just don't understand. Like, that seems like, man, I don't know. You have to be. I feel like you have to be like mentally unwell to go this route. I really do. You know what I mean? Like, and how do you find 6 people all together that are? But again, it's people do weird stuff when they feel like it's. That's why the culture is so important. You got to be careful who you hire and who's hiring. You know.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
I don't know. They ordered everything from live spiders, a box of cockroaches, pig mask, sympathy wreath, and a book. Oh, wow, man! It just random stuff. Anyway,
super random stuff, but it's all to be
threatening, right? Like that's it's bizarre. Anyway, people are strange, I guess. I don't know what else to get at.
Yeah, they are. I don't know. Do we want to go into like? Oh wait, I think somebody wrote something. Let me check that before I move on. Mentally unwell, peer pressured. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean,
yeah,
it's just got to be like a really effed up environment. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yep. I'm with Ken there too, right? Like there's something odd going on, and we don't have the full story, right? Like I wonder if it's going to come out eventually. I mean, the real reason we're talking about it is probably just because it's eBay related. But again, like I we talk about trying to find a culture fit and finding an organization that supports your values and you feel good about what they're doing. That's part of it, right? Like, every process, like even when going into your first job, and I know you're like, you're super concerned about just finding a job in a lot of cases, but you got to remember that you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. So.
Totally. Yeah. You have to. I'm very cautious now. After previous stuff, I'm very cautious now of where I work, and it's like even with the speaking of people being publicly, outwardly not super happy. I mean, we've definitely. I think it's no stranger to anyone listening or who's been on Twitter recently that people are not super happy with. Again, the continued contract that GitHub has with ICE. But at the end of the day, one thing I can definitely assure everybody is that communication continues on internally. There is one thing I love about the company is just the continued focus on social activism, on helping underrepresented groups. The ethics, I feel like are like I feel good about where I'm at, even if that's something some people don't agree with. There's still a lot of other things that GitHub is doing constantly, daily to try and help out. And I'm not saying that because like I want. It's like I'm just saying when I work somewhere, that's what I look for now. I look for a place that is conscious about their involvement, especially for tech companies, because I think there's like the importance of tech companies and like their role in politics, their role in advancement of human society, of communication. I think it's so important, and there's so many ramifications, and you just got to like try to be choosy about where you go if you can. If you've got that. Yeah. For people, that's a luxury, and if you've got it, use it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean it's interesting to watch from the outside, right? Some of that's gone on over the last week, and I know we're going to get into the whole allow list, deny list the change from master to main that GitHub did, which,
and I think even then we realized maybe we're not the best people to give those opinions. And that's why we're finding somebody that's actually the best person to have those opinions, and so
that's actually studied it and, has talked to people that are affected or, feel, whatever, like oppressed or I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. Right. Like, yeah. So we'll get into that, I'm sure, within the next couple of weeks, and, maybe we'll do a special episode or maybe we'll just slice out some time next week for it, but we're still figuring that out. So
yeah, we didn't want to just give hot takes because this is too important for that. So we're gonna like we said, we're locking down an actual expert to come on and talk about this. So
yeah.
The other thing,
cool.
There's two other things to talk about, by the way. The first one is we could just get it out of the way. I think it was yesterday, everybody was kind of like, having issues with T-Mobile, and there were some pretty graphs that came out indicating it might be a DDoS attack. And obviously I don't really know one way or the other, but publicly it's been by T-Mobile and speculated by various security experts. That's what the articles I've read say. They don't really point to who, at least the ones I've read. But apparently, it's being called a misconfiguration, which I don't know, man. I can totally see that it just being a misconfiguration that was pushed out and caused network issues, so that people were having issues with voice and data over the T-Mobile networks yesterday. And I mean, they were claiming that it was like T-Mobile. It was, I think, Fortnite was lumped in there. There were a few.
There was quite a few, right?
Right. I passed you.
Yeah. So, well, and okay, this is always the interesting thing, right? Like, I mean, I know we have a tendency to jump on that, especially because we expect those services to be up all the time. But having been on a security team and watching the security engineers do things and been involved with, oh crap, I thought I was in, the QA instance and I was in prod and I pushed a configuration and just dropped half of our customers. I feel bad for the guys on the T-Mobile side because it was something unintentional completely, right? That occurred. And then most likely the other services, like the increase in traffic was replayed because those services are down. All of a sudden your system starts to send more traffic because it's not responding, right? Yeah.
Well, the Cloudflare co-founder, by the way, said that. So they actually have the CEO and co-founder of Cloudflare confirming this.
Yeah, that they were making some network changes, and it went badly, right? Like I mean, like as a developer, have you ever pushed out a bad build? Yeah, like everyone has. So like,
when I worked at Charter Communications, I lived in Reno. You know this, but for those that don't know, I lived in not too far from Reno. We'll just say Reno, and worked at Charter Communications, and I worked in what they call master head end. Have you heard of master head end before, Seth? Like, it's really just where all that term anyways. I don't know if you've heard, but that's really just where all you're just feeding the internet to like city, both business and residential. It's like that's like the main hub routing and switching. So we worked in there so I was pretty junior at that point in my career, and what we would do is to make even the most simplest of configuration changes, you actually had to get it reviewed by like 2 peers, then reviewed by your manager, and then it's like reviewed. We sent it off to like some central I don't know, to be honest with you, I really don't to this day know who the like central command people were, but they would also then review the config. So you had like at least 4 different people reviewing these configuration changes because it was so easy to make a little change that had a cascading ripple effect. Ooh, I almost spilled my water. Almost like brings down the whole area. Like if we screwed up in that room, like Reno would have been down, and probably neighboring, zones. So
yep. Yeah. And I'm sure like half the time that I complain about Comcast, I know something like that has gone, wrong, or somebody made a slight misconfiguration, and I realize that, but it still doesn't make it any less painful, right? And that's why it gets such play, right? Like, oh, like there's a huge denial of service attack. Yeah, but basically T-Mobile denial of service themselves, right? That's you're absolutely right in using that terminology, but it's not malicious. It was unintentional. So I don't know,
it's
like
unintentionally distributed.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is like, anybody else that's having, some sort of slowdown or like whatever else at the same time gets lumped into it. Because who else? It was Fortnite. Who else was listed?
Yeah.
Sprint. It was like 4 or 5 others, but
gosh, I just had it up. Yeah, it was. It was a bunch of AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, Netflix, Chase, Facebook, Instagram, Google, Zoom, Hulu, Fortnite, and other organizations. So a bunch that they thought were all being DDoSed.
Yeah. Yep.
But it happens. It totally happens. I still sometimes I loved SWAT. I keep messing that up. I loved switching and routing. That's a really fun thing, and like, yeah, I don't know why I'm bringing that up, but it really is interesting because you can things can go wrong pretty easily, especially like BGP.
Yep.
And like that gets wild when you talk about on a global scale, various connections.
Yep. And you're trusting like all of these main like routers to tell you what they're responsible for, and like you've got pathways between different routers. It's the fact that the internet works is amazing. Right? That's really what it boils down to. If you've ever looked at that core infrastructure, and the same thing goes with DNS, right? Like you get to a certain level and you're like, really? Yeah. We're depending on these like randomly manual processes to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's how we set it up for the ARPANET 35 years ago, and it still works, right? So I mean, there's working groups that are fixing some of that and upgrading it to modern things, but a lot of that infrastructure is still pretty fragile, more fragile than most people realize.
Yep. It's really it's like duct tape and it's glue. And like when you actually dig down into like who owns the global DNS and who like manages global DNS and who manages, it gets a little weird and funky. And it's like, that actually is like a global, like it's a global, it's like, how do I say it? It's like it's almost like a global peace treaty in a way, the way that like,
I can. Yeah. And the way that we just recognize. Yeah. I mean, if, somebody in a different country decided, no, like we want that like top level domain and just started taking it, would just like, basically it would blow everything up. Right. There's all sorts of weirdness like that goes on. Which is also, there's another article that I was just reading that I want to talk about, but I don't know if we've got time today. It's,
I don't care. I mean, because they're like, let's just finish off with your article.
Okay. So,
because we do have another thing, but like it can be pushed off. Like that's not a big deal. We can push off the other thing.
Yeah. It's Journal of, here, let me throw it to you, Ken.
All right.
It's I know it looks like a random link, but it's like an actual like Journal of Information and Technology and Politics. So they're looking at it from a different lens than security. But basically it's talking about like this speaks directly to it, how threat reporting by us as an industry, by the cybersecurity industry, right, like underrepresents the actual threats to civil society, because we are so focused on, and just go read the abstract because it's really interesting. And I know, Ken, that we didn't talk about this, but it popped up and whatever. So it talks about the fact that we're so focused as a cybersecurity industry on basically technical threats and threats against like firms that are paying us to, keep out the bad, right? That we actually underrepresent the threats that are that are legitimate threats that are there against civil society in general, right? And specifically, it calls out like a prominent dissident in Saudi Arabia, and how it got infected by spyware from the government there. And like, I go back to threat models that we do, right? When I'm looking at an application, I'm doing a threat model to see, hey, who is it that actually is going to attack this application? I know we always give lip service to nation state actors, but we never really dig into it. And that's really the point behind this article is, as authoritarian regimes, as, other people in power get access to technology, we as an industry actually misrepresent the threat of that to people, to organizations, because of, I take it as the fact that it's due to the way that we're paid, the way that we actually go about this, right? Like, learning about the industry is we're very embedded in these like large organizations initially, or even like small to medium-sized businesses. They don't take into account the threat of those nation state actors because it's not something that they can do anything about within the budget that they have. And so we underreport what actually that threat is. And that's what the article is going into, right? Is basically, hey, we underreport the actual threat to our institutions and citizens specifically because of where we're at and how we're actually being paid. So it's, I don't know, like, what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I know. I think it's pretty interesting because the lone dissident that they talk about in the opening paragraph reads so much like the accusations that were thrown around with Jeff Bezos and his, like, it's literally the same exact thing. Like his, I think it was Saudi, he thought the Saudi prince using Saudi intelligence installed malware through WhatsApp on his phone, or through a backdoored WhatsApp, WhatsApp being backdoored or something or a malicious payload through WhatsApp because of a backdoor. I can't remember. But anyways, I know that Jeff Bezos, that was the original belief and accusation. And then I believe it was retracted. I think we even talked about it on this podcast having been retracted, but just reading that first paragraph and then that, like, those two things have some parallels in them. And so, yeah. So to recap, I think what is what you're saying, maybe I'm not understanding, is what you're saying that we're reporting as an industry on critical infrastructure, on like larger targets of organizations that are targets, and not necessarily the individuals that are, we're not focusing or reporting on individuals that are attacked through various governments. Is that what you're saying, or is it? Or is that what it's saying?
That's what it's saying. But like, yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily like making my point that well today. Realistically, I definitely am guilty of this on how I report threats to an application because I'm so focused on the technical aspect.
I see.
Right. So I don't, and like, granted, we're not necessarily paid to go and think about like nation state level threats, right? We're just not. There's people like in other divisions and governments, and maybe even some like think tanks that have more to do with this. But in general, I definitely underreport like what I consider to be nation state threats, because I don't think that the industry at large and most of these companies that I deal with have the funds to protect themselves against it, right? I do think there's some, like, so we don't necessarily talk about the threats when we probably should.
Right.
I know there's definitely safety in numbers. Like we talk about like using AWS or CloudFront or Cloudflare, like these large organizations that protect against some of this. because they have pooled all of these different companies behind them. And so they're probably dealing with it at a different level, but we don't necessarily talk about that, right? Like, hey, I'm dealing with this organization. Yeah. What?
But think about why. Think about why.
Yeah.
Like if you do consulting services, right? And we've been doing consultant services, you and I, for a long time. When other than the cases where, and I would put all the money betting that Stefan has definitely come across these customers who they have their specific need is to address nation state attacks. They need to make sure that, like, even if it's a threat to just the one single lone user, potentially through a very convoluted, complex set of things, like, it needs to be reported because that's what they're specifically paying for. And I would bet you that Trail of Bits, they probably get those types of customers. On the whole, though, most paying customers, they would roll their eyes at those types of findings in a report, though. They're not concerned with that. They're like, nation state, whatever, man. I'm like, I sell widgets and graphs, and I just want to make sure that I'm not going to end up on like my list of users being posted to Payspin and end up on the news. That's their real concern. So you as a consultant end up having to, as a cybersecurity firm, right? You report on what you're asked to report on. I'm not going to sit there if you tell me I have 1 week to complete this thing and you just want me to look for any dangling high severity fines, which is ultimately what most companies seem to want when they walk in the door for an assessment, or at least, like, when you talk through all the various options, they're like, what's the cheapest, fastest, checkboxy, oftentimes, right? And that's not every customer, but like most of the time, that's just not what they're interested in. So I would say it's not necessarily only a bias of the security community. I would say that bias is based off of customer influence heavily. That would be my opinion, not my hot take. It's probably influenced by money and needs.
But no, I mean, it definitely is, right? And so, like, I don't know if the article, I need to dig into it some more, but like, I'm not sure their point was basically that we were actually underrepresenting what that threat was to civil society. But I'm with you. It's a result of how we're paid as cybersecurity firms and what the companies are looking for, right? So, yeah.
Ken Toller brought up a good point about maybe we're just not communicating effectively the importance of maybe not communicating the vulnerability and its importance properly. And I think you could probably make that. Argument definitely in some cases. And I also think you could say in many cases, though, that like it's really just, it's hard enough, dude. It is hard enough. It has been in the past hard enough to get a dev to give a shit about SQL injection that's error-based, very, very, very scary. Like, you can do things, and they're like, okay, but how many people are going to know how to do that? Well, not a lot of people, but I mean, like, that a tool to exploit that's publicly accessible on the internet. And is that the point? Are you trying to go for your $3 million or 3 million customers and like prevent against what they know, or the one like person that woke up that day, drank a cup of coffee and was like, let me run SQL map on your site, So yeah, I would say maybe I'm a little bitter, but it's probably a mixture of both.
Yeah. I don't know. He said, like, Ken also brought up the MITRE attack framework, right? That people are starting to ask about that and how things, like, where those attacks are coming from. But I go back to it because I know, like, that I've done threat models and like security reviews for large. Like, I'm thinking about the one time that this really became an issue, and we had a big discussion on it for a large cell phone manufacturer, right? And it was a very interesting topic because they were concerned. Like, it was the two things that they were concerned about were fraud, right? Somebody being able to do like SIM cloning and like easily actually, jump onto somebody else's account and use that, and nation states, right? as far as, hey, how could someone get access to this device and start listening to things, right? And but that was very specific to an organization, to the threats that they saw as relevant to them. Most other places, to Ken's point, or your point, right? Like that, if I bring up, hey, guess what? There's somebody in, the Russian FSB or whatever it is that could, take advantage of this to, attack all of your customers of your little website, that most of them would be like, okay, that's not the real threat that I'm concerned about, right? So,
yeah.
Anyway,
no, I didn't know that people are asking about that more and more now, about the attack chain, and that MITRE had made that sort of thing that game. I don't know if that's what's that?
Have you played with that attack framework at all, or done anything with it?
Sorry, you broke up. I did not catch a word you just said, or I'm breaking up. One of the two.
Oh, it might be me. Hold on, let me see. Now we're to attack MITRE.org, right? I just posted that link. I wondered if you had looked at that framework yet, or if it was anything that you.
Oh
had.
Yeah,
okay.
I've looked at it. Yeah, I've looked at that before. Let me put this in here. There we go. Cool. Yeah, I've looked at this before, for sure.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to classify, exploits that we see, right? Is where's it coming from? I don't know. It does feel like we've been talking about impact for a long time. But, the threat itself to the application that you're looking at, the people, the users of the application, is that something that we need to consider? Maybe, right? Go read the article. It was just very interesting to me to take
I tried skimming it while we were talking and trying to listen to you as a priority, and then and I was like, all right, I'm like, can't do this. So
okay, all right. Well, we'll take that one online, because we've been going for over an hour again. Even when we're like, oh, we don't know necessarily what we're going to talk about today, but yeah, this is how it happens, right? We roll from bots and whatever to the MITRE attack framework. So
yeah. Well, again, to sort of recap, for those that did not stick with us the full hour and 12 and a half minutes, next week we will have Ken Toller, we will have Mike McCabe on the podcast, talking about the cloud security at scale. And you're probably, in case you're wondering, because there's obviously a lot of cloud security talks. What I think, I loved theirs. I loved that talk, Seth, and it was because they took what is the all of these talks, what they talk about, all that kind of like the ideal scenarios and the cool tools and all that stuff. And they're like, all right, let's break it down by business type and let's get practical. Let's get realistic. Let's see and they use actual changed to protect the innocent or guilty or independent scenarios. It's super awesome. I really wait for next week to hear them talk a bit. So on that. So that's next week.
Cool. Yep. All right. Well, good. Then we'll catch everybody online. And looking forward to that next week. Maybe we can talk some more about, nation state threat actors against the cloud, because that could be interesting as well. But find us online. Let us know what you're doing to curate content, and we'll talk to everybody again soon. Thanks for joining us for the 100th episode.